Hello, everyone, and welcome to Rock, Paper, Hand Grenades. I'm Matt Connerton here, as always, with the Honorable Gary Hopper, or Gary S. Hopper. Sean, is it?
Yeah,
Yes.
Sean, that's right.
I was trying to catch you there because I didn't know if you were giving me your real middle name last week. So
I'm not smart enough to keep track of that stuff, so I have to tell the truth.
okay, well, it's less to remember.
It is a lot less to remember. I don't know how people do that because I know I've known a lot of people throughout the years who are really good at lying.
Yeah.
I don't know how they keep track.
Yeah.
It just seems like something. I don't know. You'd have to like write stuff down. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I told Matt that my last name was Sean. I was thinking, I was walking by the store down here, and it said Food and Spirits.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm thinking to myself, what if you take that kind of literally?
Yeah.
Like, you sit down to eat, you get a hamburger and french fries, and this kind of green, amorphous creature kind of sits up next to you. Let me have a french fry there, young feller.
Yeah. So like a pirate ghost appears.
A pirate ghost, or, and it would be kind of disturbing.
It would be, but some people might enjoy that. And I'll tell you what.
Oh, for people that don't like have any friends, they would go in there and they'd have somebody to.
It beats dining alone. Yeah.
That is a good idea. I guess so. Food and Spirits is probably a.
Yeah, you should try it.
Yeah. Oh no, I'm a sissy.
You could have, light some candles, have a little seance while you eat. See who pops up. Maybe you get to talk to Elvis or somebody like that.
Elvis Parsley.
Elvis Parsley. Have
Yep.
some Elvis Parsley with your Elvis Parsley.
That's right. Now, you think outside the box.
Yes.
That's why I like having you here, Matt. You're all right.
Well, thank you.
Okay, so anyway.
And I spill food everywhere.
I know. We're going to read that again?
Oh, I think Norm took it with him,
Yeah.
unfortunately. That was a good email, though. Thanks, Ginger.
I am not a nice person. So I had my bill. Now I got to remember the number. House Bill 1457 was heard last Thursday in the Education Committee, and I guess I should introduce my guest in case she wants to talk about it. Diane McCormick is a friend of mine from church who has come on to talk about post-abortive stress. And so I just introduce you. So they got a split screen. So
Yes, we're all fancy. We're like cable
fancy.
news or something.
Oh yeah, this is awesome.
Yeah.
So you can see yourself. Yeah. See now you've made the big time.
This
Really.
is it. Yeah.
This is it.
Yeah.
When you get wicked famous, though, you have to give Matt and I a cut because of this exposure.
But there's also the possibility that it just doesn't
No.
doesn't get any better than this.
This.
Well, we are kind of I like to think we're the pinnacle of
Oh yeah. You could look at it that way.
pinnacle of something
You could-
anyway.
we're
I don't know what,
pinnacles.
but yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. This happens a lot.
So yeah. It's only on this program we can be talking about post-abortive stress and making jokes.
Yes.
This is the only place you're going to get that. Everybody else would be like really, really serious. So anyway, I did my a legislation that I've been stressed out about for at least 6 months or 8 months. It was to try to protect teachers. Right now, if a teacher, a science teacher, introduces confrontational or non-standard information into a science class, she can get disciplined. There's been teachers around the country that have, science teachers that were no longer allowed to teach science because they introduced information into the classroom that disagreed with the theory of evolution.
Okay.
Okay, so I've got a bill in to basically protect science teachers.
Yeah.
And I testified on that, and it took a lot of work. I had to, I went through one of the ladies from church lent me a book, biology book from the Goffstown High School, because I always had my idea of what they were teaching in school, but I wasn't positive. So I really had to know. I couldn't just go in there and be, have the rug taken out from under me and say, find out that they were already teaching had already compensated for the mistakes and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So I had to go through the book and found mistakes like, for instance, when they're teaching evolution, if you're as old as me, No, that can't be possible.
That's old.
That's wicked old, yeah. You didn't have to actually agree with me, Diane, by the way.
Yeah, Diane.
I
Wow.
know. I know. You'd think somebody, lady from church would be kind of supportive.
I
not
know. I'm a little disappointed.
jabbing when she gets... Anyway, so...
I'm supportive.
Oh, yeah, supportive. And
The truth is,
Agreeable.
you fit right
agreeable,
in. Yeah.
agreeable, yeah.
There you go.
So anyway, if you're as old as me, you remember back, I think it was in the 70s, they discovered Lucy in Africa. It was Dr. Johansen, yeah. And Lucy was supposed to be an intermediate step between chimps and humans because she walked upright. That was
Remember that.
Remember that?
Yeah, I do remember.
Okay, well, as they're supporting their theory of evolution in this biology book, they still have that in there. In 1996, in National Geographic, there was, I think it was National Geographic, they had an interview with that same, the guy who discovered it,
Yeah.
and he explained that, that it was false.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're talking almost 20 years
Sure.
since they've already established this was not actual evidence
Okay.
of anything.
Yeah.
In fact, he says in the part that I presented to the committee that it's when you're, first of all, you got these guys going out into the field, and if they don't discover something, money starts to dry up.
Yeah.
Okay, so they're financially motivated to find evidence of evolution.
That makes sense. Yeah.
It's also prideful.
Oh, it's pride.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
You know, if they have a theory and they don't want to, you know, they're bent on their theory.
Yeah.
Right.
It's bad for their careers in a way if they don't
Right.
find what
There's
something.
that, and there's just when you buy a new car, you see that car everywhere, and you got that mentality because they want to find this so much that he says, like he said in this article, the professor who found this stuff, that you are biased by nature. Everybody is biased one way or the other, and so you go into finding things with this bias, with this motivation, with maybe deadlines, and you're apt to make mistakes, and he did. And He
Yeah.
admitted it.
Yeah.
And but the fact of the matter is, even though that was almost 20 years ago, they're still using that as evidence of evolution.
Right.
And I pointed out that back when I was going to school, I don't know what they taught you in biology, but when I was going to school, they said there was a very the first form of life was probably something like an amoeba.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And lightning struck a primordial ooze that happened to have all the chemicals necessary for that to exist, and it happened to happen. It was just an accident. Well, we now know that amoeba, that very simple creature that, back in Darwin's days, I think they were aware of, but they thought it was probably not that much more complicated than a drop of water. And the idea of lightning striking this primordial ooze and life happening made sense in that in the early 1800s, after I was going to call him Al Franken, and then I was going to call him Frankenstein. It was Benjamin Franklin.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yes.
Benjamin Franklin started being able to play with electricity. In the early 1800s and late 1700s, there were scientists who were taking like frog legs and attaching electrical stimulus to them shortly after they died. And so
Yeah.
there was a current belief that as they progressed in scientific knowledge, they would be able to reanimate life.
Yeah.
Okay, they didn't understand that it was just basically an electrical connection in there, and before it decayed, a little electric shock would stimulate the muscle, and after a while longer, that electrical connection would have decayed, and it's no good. That was the fundamental foundation behind Frankenstein. That's
Okay.
why that was written
Yeah.
about that same time.
Oh, okay. Oh.
Okay, so
That makes sense, yeah.
so when you get up to the 1850s when Darwin's writing, and they think this amoeba is simple, the premise of lightning striking a primordial ooze and life happening seems reasonable, and at the time I would have to agree. Okay, but now we know that very, very simple little creature of an amoeba is, first of all, it has an outside membrane that the probability of that happening by accident is pretty close to zero. Okay, but let's give them that. You have this outside membrane that actually has openings that are only stimulated by foods that the amoeba can eat, and then it allows the food inside and it's digested.
It's more complex than they had imagined.
Yeah, but it
So as-
gets even more gooder. Okay, so it's got to digest. It actually has some sensor that understands that that's food, and something else that just touched it is not food. And then you get into the gene, and the gene sequence is 230 billion characters long. Combined with the complexity of the inner workings for this thing to feed itself, to do everything, and then to split into two amoebas. At the committee, I said that would an amoeba happening by accident, which is the basic premise for evolution, is that life began by accident, and then it evolved from there.
Right.
All right. And so I pointed out that we now know that those single-cell creatures are so profoundly complex. Lightning striking a primordial ooze, and that happening would be the same as lightning striking a primordial ooze and an F-14 popping up. And the F-14 can reproduce itself.
That would save a lot of money on military spending.
It
if
would,
that were
if you- if
possible,
you could do
actually.
it, exactly.
Yeah.
But my basic, and I went into some other stuff about the evolution, but I said, for instance, as a legislator, just talking about science, when we went into global warming, you try to find something on the internet about global warming, a objective understanding of what global warming is or isn't, if it is or isn't caused by humans, and is it just global change? Is it caused by sunspots? Is it, you can't find it. I found one, but it took me probably days looking.
Really?
Well,
Yeah.
not exclusively, but over
Yeah.
time I finally found one guy up in Canada that was trying to find the reason why certain fish would populate an area and they could fish them, and then the fish would almost disappear and another type of fish would come in.
Yeah.
And it was the change in temperature in the water, and they didn't know why the water was changing temperature, and he associated it with sunspots.
Oh, really?
You should look into Kent Hovind, H-O-U-V-I-N-D.
Yeah, but the problem is you can look into Kent Hooven or
He's
look
a
into...
scientist.
Right, I know, but then you have to look into, well, where's he get his money? What's his motivation?
Yeah,
In other words,
always follow the money.
you have to follow the money, and
Yeah.
if he's, like, for instance, before we had this show,
Well, he's got creation science.
I know, but that's just the problem. If you go, like when I presented all that stuff to the committee last week, I could not go to a Christian website to get any information.
But his information is also, or can be,
Right. But as
non-Christian
soon-
information.
I
It's
understand,
scientific information
I
that
understand
supports it.
that. I understand that. But as soon as that name comes up, like if I copy and paste, because that's what I
You
did.
get glassy-eyed looks and people.
As soon as that name appears on any piece of information, it becomes a Christian-based creationism, and therefore
Yeah.
it's everything is thrown out. It's done.
Right.
So every piece of information I had to come up with, I had to come up with from not even, there's no such almost
Non-biased.
non-biased
as much as you can
theoretically
get.
as much
Yeah.
as you can get.
Yeah.
Right.
or try to acquire, and it's very, very difficult. Everything is political and everything
Right.
is biased, and and it's maddening. And on the global warming one, it's you got your Vice President Gore, who's making a fortune off of global warming.
Right.
And if you really believed what he was saying, you would think he would be driving something other than an SUV.
Right. But he's a hypocrite.
Yeah. So.
He's got a huge. Well, he does. He's got a huge home that uses lots of energy.
Oh yeah, like
and,
yeah. So it's really as a legislator, it's so difficult to find information that's unbiased, and that's basically the idea of the bill, is to allow a teacher to introduce
Other theories.
Right.
other evidence,
No.
possibly, not even necessarily other theories.
Now, I have a question, and you might be able to answer this because this is something you're thinking about a lot. Because I've asked a couple of people, and no one seems to know.
My throat's killing me.
Is it?
Yeah.
Whatever happened to? Because I don't hear this term anymore.
No bugs after
I heard
the
it for
show.
a while. We can't do our
No,
usual
no, I'm
our
not
manly
feeling good.
embrace.
Yes. Right.
Okay. Maybe next week we'll do
Yeah.
we'll do two of them.
Twice.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
good.
Okay.
Excellent.
Whatever happened to intelligent design? The theory of intelligent
Can't
design.
use that.
Why not?
I don't even hear the term anymore. It just kind of went away. And
Yeah, because every time, and because when they take the paper trail on intelligent design, it goes back to a Christian
right.
who is proposing the idea, and therefore it's null and void, and the courts have thrown it out.
Really.
So basically, if you're a Christian, you can't have a scientific theory anymore. So Newton, you can throw his theories right out the.
We should throw everybody's theories out then, because everyone's biased in one way or another, and if we can't hear everybody's side, then how...
No, you can't anymore. No, sorry. I don't know what century you're living in, but no, you can hear what you're told to believe, if you'd like, but that's it.
We were all created with that innate knowledge that we were created. And whether or not we want to listen to that, that's a choice.
Yeah, see, Diane, that's your beliefs. And I'm sick of you imposing them on me. But anyway, so that was that's basically the bill, is to try to so that a teacher isn't disciplined because they introduce legislation. Like, for instance, right now, if a teacher came in and said, well, we have this piece of evidence in your textbook about Lucy, and I want you guys to be aware that this is not true. And based on the fact that when I introduced this legislation, I was getting hate mail from different countries.
Really.
Wow.
I mean, like people attacking me, telling me how stupid I was, and people in state who actually started attacking my Facebook page and insulting me on my own Facebook page, so I blocked them.
Yeah.
Then somebody else came in and started attacking me, so I had to block anybody from commenting on my Facebook page that wasn't a friend.
Yeah. Yeah.
So and I've been wicked careful about who I've let become my friends since then.
yeah. Wow.
And so I can imagine a teacher, if they allowed information that contradicted anything in evolution, there would be one parent. That's all you need is one cotton-picking parent, because right now that's all it takes anymore. Saying, "Oh, you're just a a creationist, and we don't need our kids being indoctrinated into your Christian beliefs," and they would have hell to pay.
Do you know generally now, and I think we talked about this a little bit last week, but I mean, I'm curious, have you talked to any teachers directly about how they teach evolution now? Because when I was a kid, they always taught it as the theory of evolution. I mean, that's literally the phrase they use. The theory was always in there.
Yes.
Do you know if that's how it's taught now in New Hampshire?
It is still taught with that word,
Yeah.
but what the problem is what that word means now. Okay, theory no longer means an idea with some supporting evidence.
Yeah.
A theory means basically now that it's factual unless you come up with something really, really good against it.
Okay. Because there's nothing else being presented with it. It's just
Like, yeah,
if you're only putting forward one theory, then by default.
And there's nothing to be compared to, or
Then-
you can't
yeah.
compare that theory to another theory, because if they're not allowed to discuss that,
Right.
then I don't find that to be
So by
a
default,
balanced.
by default, people accept that theory as fact if there's only one theory.
right. And,
Okay.
and the fact of the matter is, if you poll a lot of science teachers, a lot of them don't even like teaching evolution because they don't necessarily believe in it.
Right.
So they're teaching something that they're not that even confident of. What was I going to say after that?
Oh, I don't know. I wish Norm was here. He could have told you because he's
Yeah,
such
that's
a.
right. That's right. That's what we need Norm calling
Gotta
to
get
tell me
him.
what I was about to say.
Yeah. I hope he's watching.
Yeah.
He probably went out to dinner with Al.
Well, he would, if he knew I was going to be stuck, he would have known to watch, known to call me.
Or he just takes
Or
pleasure in
he's enjoying the fact that I'm choking.
sitting there laughing. Look at Gary.
He's probably laughing all the way down the elevator because he already knew that was going to happen.
That's right. That's right.
Sure.
And Ginger's probably watching, and she's freaking out because you got your
Yeah.
your beverage there.
All right. But anyway, so that So that's my point.
Yeah.
Of that was my bill, House Bill 1457. Call you anybody on the Education Committee. They're going to decide on that tomorrow.
Oh, really? What do you think? I mean,
That is if you're in support of it. If you disagree with me, call somebody else.
yeah. You know what you should say. If you disagree, they're actually they're voting on it on Wednesday.
Yeah, Friday.
Friday.
That's a
Today's
good point.
Wednesday. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm
That's
sorry,
a good
yeah.
point.
Yeah.
So
Oops.
I don't
Thursday,
know what that
call
is.
Thursday before tomorrow morning. Any legislator on the Science and Tech Committee, if you're for it, on Friday you can call them and if you're against it. That's a good idea.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. I should go into politics.
All right, now, and this kind of blends in what we're talking with Diane, because the problem is even getting information on post-traumatic stress as it relates to abortion is difficult. I was trying to find stuff. So what I did is I downloaded some stuff on post-traumatic stress syndrome. Period. Because to me, it's got to be the same. I mean, if I know my dad, when he came back from Korea, and he saw a lot of his friends die. Some of them
Yeah.
blew up on top of him. I don't know what it would be like to,
yeah.
to be on the ground, face down on the ground, and know that your buddy just is on, just got blown up,
Right.
and he's,
And that you could be next at any
and
moment.
body parts,
I mean,
his
it's-
body parts are on top of you right
Yeah.
now, and
Yeah.
that's going to mess with your head.
Oh yeah.
And my dad held it in, and I guess that's about the worst thing you can do.
Yeah.
And so we grew up in a very, very militaristic home. It was,
Really?
when he told you to jump, you asked him how high while you were in the air. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean, he scared my friends and never said a word to them. My friends would not come over to my house if my father was there.
Really?
And he never did anything.
Yeah.
He's just that angry.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah.
Wow.
And the thing is there's a fundamental difference between boys and girls. There was a study done, and I love this because it's so sadistic. They took little toddlers, okay? They
Yeah.
took little toddlers, and they put them in this room, and there was nothing bad about the room. And the mother would walk away from the room, and then they would put a plexiglass partition.
Yeah.
And the mother would walk out of sight, and the toddlers didn't know how to really express themselves. So they would walk over, and they'd run into the partition, and invariably the little boys would try to knock it down.
Yeah.
The little girls would sit down and start crying.
Yeah.
Okay? So, which brings me to the reaction to post-traumatic stress is probably going to be suicide amongst girls, and post-traumatic stress against men coming back from Vietnam is going to be aggression.
Yeah.
Because they're reacting to the same emotion
Right.
of being, of nightmares and things like that, and they don't know how to handle it, so they're going to either drink and might become in trouble, or, I mean, that's why if you look at a lot of the guys that are homeless around this country, when you see homeless people, remember they're probably vets.
Yeah.
But anyway, I've taken up too much time. I wanted to. I need to take a break anyway. Explain to us your story, hon.
Explain to you my story. Well, you're leading into post-traumatic stress, but I believe there's a little, personally, I think there's a little difference with post-abortive stress. But men and women regarding a decision of abortion would react somewhat different. And there is some studies on that. There are very little, but there are websites that you can go to that'll educate you on how a man is, if you will, designed, and how a woman is designed, and how our bodies and our emotions will react to this decision afterwards.
Okay.
It's legal. The science and legislature and the powers that be in this country are saying it's a relatively safe and health service to women. So you're approaching this topic of abortion with the mindset that you're being told it's relatively safe and it's a health service to women. But what we're finding since 1973 until now, we're finding what I call walking wounded. And you're talking, 1 million plus men and women affected by this every year from that year moving forward. And what we're finding and what's starting to emerge is health issues. Women with more subtle than suicidal attempts, but it would be workaholics, eating disorders, anger issues. As in the post-traumatic stress, you also have the depression and issues around that.
Yeah.
When you're dealing, again, the topic of when does life begin? Personally, I don't think you can conclusively say it's because when life begins at a certain point in time. I understand everybody has their own beliefs, but really, when a man and a woman are told they're going to have a baby, does it really matter when it was conceived or when life begins in your belief system? You believe that you're going to have a baby, period.
Right.
So when you're in a crisis mode and the laws say it's safe and someone's telling you that, it's not a baby, it's just some tissue right now, it's okay, you still innately know it's a child or it's a baby in your mind.
We had Kurt Wepler from New Hampshire Right to Life, president of New Hampshire Right to Life, a few weeks ago.
Right.
Because he was on to talk about, what did I say, House Bill what? You can still call your legislators. House Bill 1659. And he mainly was talking about the breast cancer and how as soon as a woman becomes pregnant, her body starts changing physically.
Every part of your body, every cell in your body is reacting and responding to the fact that there is something growing inside. If you abort that process abruptly, you're shocking your system. I believe that. I've experienced it. So I know it shocks your system. And they're finding a relationship with illnesses throughout a woman's life. I want to focus, too, yes, on the woman, but this affects everybody involved in that decision, the parents, the grandparents, a friend. Later in life, 30 years later, might have remorse because they helped their friend make that decision. And later they come to realize that, it's in the back of their mind, and they're very remorseful about that. Remorse is part of this stress.
Right.
And it emerges out of people differently. It affects your health differently. I spent 27 years with fibromyalgia. I no longer feel pain from that. But there are a slew of health issues regarding that. And that's not talked about much, and that's not, and it is directly related to the abortion decision in your life. And there is now more and more places that you can go to get help with that and find peace with that, but it's not talked about. People are going about seeking out an abortion because in their crisis moment, it's the quick fix.
Yeah.
And not realizing that there's an aftermath from that decision.
Right.
There is a percentage, maybe very small, percentage of people that might think and feel that it was still, in their opinion, the best decision that they could have made for themselves or all involved. But I find in
How much of that, though, is just...
denial and fear,
No.
protection, self-protection from the reality?
No, my big issue is, and if anybody who watches this show for any length of time, is divorce. And when you talk about people getting divorced and the effect that has on kids, people will invariably say, well, it was the best thing for my children. The odds are it wasn't, but there's no way they can really come to grip that they've taken the time to convince themselves that it's the right thing to do. They do it, and if you even question that, it makes them very defensive. It's in other words, you have to have an abortion. You have to convince yourself it's okay. Go through the procedure and talk yourself through it and
Yep.
justify it.
Yep.
So years after, you're probably still saying to yourself, it was okay, even though inside you're
They
still
have
tearing you up.
statistics that show that immediately after an abortion, for a certain period of time, there's a sense of relief. Because if you are in crisis, then the crisis is over.
Right.
For a certain period of time after that, it sets in. The reality of what a woman feels starts to, you think about it in some quiet times, and it starts to come to surface. Most women that have had an abortion, from what I understand, and myself included, that date will never leave my mind. The day that I had my abortion when I was young. And other dates throughout the year might trigger that, a different kind of memory, when the baby would have been born. Or, you know, those memories, that remorse will always be with a woman or a man as well. I know that men that have been part of those decisions have their own, and they deal with things with, like you said, as the symptoms of post-traumatic.
Right.
Very real, walking wounded. But there is a way to get healing and get peace from that choice. And to talk about it, I always said my favorite phrase is, I was gagged by guilt and silenced by shame. And if we can get past the guilt and shame and educate people that these symptoms are real, this does stay with a man and a woman for their entire life. Even though the guilt and shame for me is gone, and that's through forgiveness and God's forgiveness and understanding God's role in my life. But now that the guilt and shame is gone, there's still remorse.
Sure,
There's still sadness. But I know where she is, and I know that someday I'll go and I'll be able
She'll
to meet
slap
her.
you upside the head.
She might. She's got my sense of humor.
How long did that take you to get past the guilt and the shame part, where you could open up and talk about it?
I participated in a Bible study that walked me through remorse of a loss.
Yeah.
Because what's not being talked about or faced in our society today is that it really is a loss. And you know, where do you go when society is telling you that, oh, you're better off. Now you went to college. How could you say, you know, how could you be remorseful? You got to finish school. And then there's another part of society that's, you know, pretty much condemning you. So where does a person go? Where is it safe to say, I made a mistake, this is wrong, this is affecting my health? Where do we go? We need more people and to be able to talk about it. But to get to that place, I'd have to say that I was in denial for most of the time.
Sure.
I pushed it out of my head. I was actually very angry at activists.
Really?
I was, you know, not outwardly, but if I was driving down the road and I saw them, I turned away and was very angry. I was angry because it hurt me personally.
Yeah.
Well, get me back on track.
I can't get you back on track because that means I'd have to be on track.
Well,
The blind leading the blind. Yeah.
Pretty much.
Yeah. And I mean,
But one of the things.
and I'm always derailing the train, so you know,
Yeah,
I'm
you
no
can't
help
look
either,
to him
really.
for any help
Yeah,
at all.
yeah.
He's pretty well.
well,
But yeah, when I was talking to one of my friends in the legislature, Lee Kwan, who was in Vietnam, and he saw a lot of bad stuff.
well, doesn't it help when you talk about
Well,
it?
that's what he said. He said that the guys like my father who couldn't talk about it were the guys who suffered the most.
Exactly. And there's a population of people, not just women, but people, men and women, that are walking wounded, that are not able to articulate what's going on with them. Because I spent a lot of those years not realizing it was because of that decision that I was hurting.
Yeah.
I started fibromyalgia symptoms when I was in high school.
Wow, that's young for that.
And it was not diagnosed or known about until
Yeah.
much later in my life.
Yeah.
But that's right. You had asked me a question, when or how long did it take? When I did the Bible, it took me 2 years to get to that Bible study. From the moment,
Yeah, we don't have a call screener. We'll
Okay.
we'll grab this. Hi, welcome to Rock Paper Hand Grenades. Who's on the line?
Hi, this is Kathy, Representative Harper's friend of the State House.
Well, I wouldn't go that far. You haven't bought me coffee all week.
Oh.
Yeah, all right.
Somebody's in trouble now.
You are.
Anyway, go ahead, hon. Go ahead, Kathy.
Okay, I just wanted to thank the young woman that was on and congratulate her for her bravery and her willingness to share her story, because this may help a lot of other young women. And I think she's wonderful for coming on. And I just wanted to say thank you, and I wanted to maybe make a suggestion. You know, as reps, we have to do our lobbying. And there is a bill that has passed the House, and it's going to the Senate.
Is that 1659?
And it's a woman's right to know bill.
That's 1659. Hey.
Hello?
Yeah. That's how.
This bill will make sure that any abortionist informs a woman of the possible and the probable effects, not just to her unborn child, but to her. And I think this is a very, very important bill, because so many women would never realize all the ramifications of an abortion. And I thought this would be a good opportunity to let people know that this bill, it's called 1659, is going before the Senate, and it does deserve support, because a lot of women have gone through abortion with very little idea of what would be facing them in the future. And we can only empathize with these women and hope that we can save some women from this experience. And again, I want to thank your guest very much. She's got a lot of courage, and I congratulate her for coming on.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kathy.
Okay, bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. She's wonderful. She's been. We were freshmen together, and when we both got elected in 2000.
Yeah.
Believe it or not, I met her because she was on the Fish and Game Committee with me,
Oh,
which is definitely, she was gone all the time because she's totally pro-choice. I mean, pro-life, yeah, pro-choice. Okay, totally pro-life out there fighting this. She's been fighting this fight up in the legislature for a long time. So we got this. That's one thing I'm glad she called, because I knew it was House Bill 1659, but I didn't know that I'd forgotten that it had already made it to the Senate.
Yay.
So you want to call your senator, because all this bill does, if it goes through, is it will require a young girl before an abortion to actually have an idea of the possible ramifications. It's like any drug you take has a list of side effects.
right. Yeah.
And the fact that anybody can even vote against this is, to me, is reprehensible.
In other words, it's important to make the point that people who are pro-choice have nothing to fear from this.
No.
Because whenever they hear something like this, they automatically go into defense mode and say, well, this is a slippery slope on the way to outline abortion and whatnot. But that's not what this is. This is just, knowledge is power.
If you go
should know
to
the
when you
consequences.
go to your doctor for a procedure, they're going to show you what they're going to do, what they
Right.
need to do. And
Right.
I had a hysterectomy, and my doctor showed me
Yeah.
what he needed to do to help me.
Right.
And he told you what possible things to look out for.
What to
And,
Exactly.
expect, yeah.
if you're gonna, if some complication happened down the road, you'd understand what that symptom was.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And, it's the same.
And the more that women can share their experiences, will educate the medical field in being able to help people in the future and being
Right.
honest. It's about being truthful.
Right.
Right.
It's not pro-choice or pro-life. It's
Yeah.
about being truthful.
Giving you
it's
the
about
information you need.
educating.
Truthiness.
Truthiness. Oh, good word. Truthiness.
truthiness.
Yes.
It's
very-
educating
very
people.
Colbert.
We need to educate ourselves. If we educate ourselves, then our minds will change.
Yeah.
Yep.
And if we change our minds, then so will legislature.
Yep. It's absolutely true. It's not reasonable, especially when you consider some of these kids going in for abortions are only 15 years old, and if they know that there's even if it's only a 5% chance that they will have suicidal thoughts for the next, or possibly for the next year, or whatever that time frame is, and things like that. At least when they have those thoughts, they'll be saying, "Oh yeah, they told me this would happen," and then be able to get some help.
Right.
Right. Right.
You will know, there's also for parents, if they see a change in their child,
Right.
and change in their behavior or their attitude, they say that about recognizing if your child is doing drugs. Those symptoms are as well part of, my parents didn't know I made that choice when I was 17.
Right.
I was able to have that done without them knowing.
Yeah.
So, if they had recognized, my change in attitude or tone or behavior, they might have thought I was doing drugs, which I wasn't, but
Right. Yeah.
I don't know.
I talked to at a spaghetti dinner. I don't know how many years ago. A woman. She was a nurse. She said there was a young girl came in about 16, 17, had an abortion, went home, went to bed, was hemorrhaging. Finally, she got so scared, she finally talked to her dad. She called her dad, and because her dad was a surgeon at the hospital that she had the abortion at, and he had no clue.
Yeah.
That's horrible.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's real, though.
That's wicked. And
It's so accessible.
I mean, and parental notification, the governor vetoed it. And that's not, that's not a pro, I mean,
Right.
that's not a pro-life, pro-choice thing. It's
Right.
like
But
common sense.
But it's the same thing. People who are pro-choice, they get all nervous, that because as you know, you've heard me say it. I'm pro-choice,
Right.
but this makes sense to me, just like the parental notification thing makes sense to me.
Yeah, well,
I don't fear that that's going to overturn.
Wouldn't it be better if we educated, whether you're pro-choice or not, just educating people of what's
Absolutely.
happening?
Absolutely. You can make a better decision with more information. Always.
Yeah, absolutely. And
Yeah.
that's kind of the whole thing is like, and that's what people don't understand about the legislature. There's some people who are so adamantly opposed to things. Like the first term, I was a co-sponsor of parental notification. It failed. Second term, we had a supermajority. That was the same term that I was trying to get rid of the speaker's hunting buddy from. So I stayed out of it because I didn't want to hurt the chances of it going through. But still voted for it, obviously,
Yeah.
and it went through, but squeaked by. And Benson was actually Governor Benson helped to get through.
Craig Benson, yeah.
First thing, as soon as it passed, the pro-abortion people took it to court, and it got tied up in court for years. And then the Democrats took control. I think it was in 2008. Is that correct, or 6? Of the New Hampshire House. I don't remember.
Well, probably 2008, because that was a pretty big wave.
2006.
Oh, it was? Okay.
They took control of the New Hampshire House in 2006. And the first thing they did, as much as they complain about the Republicans not concentrating on the things that matter, concentrating on the budget, within, I think, I could be wrong, but usually a piece of legislation takes months and months and months to get through. Within like a month or two, they had that repealed.
No kidding.
Because, well, they had a Democrat in the corner office, they had a democratically controlled Senate, democratically controlled House. Boom, it was done.
Yeah.
They repealed it. This time, now that we took back the House and Senate in the last election, we not only got parental notification through, we actually had enough of a majority to override the governor's veto. But it's such a polarized, politicized issue. Trying to find common ground or even discuss it logically is out the window.
Yeah.
It seems that everybody's reactive.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
And you got to wonder where that reaction's coming from. If 1.5 million women over the course of so many years have either had an abortion or know somebody who's had one or was part of that decision, I sit back and wonder, where does this anger come from? Where does this anger come from? Why are we reactive to this? Why not be proactive to this topic?
Right.
Yeah. Oh, we have another call. Hi, welcome to Rock, Paper, Hand Grenades. Who's on the line?
My name's Tom.
I'm sorry, Tom? Is that?
Gentlemen talking about how this issue has become very politicized and polarized. I'm wondering, do you feel that you're feeding into that polarization and politicalization of the issue?
Feeding it how?
Well, like, for example, as he was recapping his history in the legislature trying to push the bill through the last time. He talked about the pro-abortion people. Now, I get in your mind because you're anti-abortion that you can call them the pro-abortion people, but they're not in favor of abortion. And they call themselves right to choose. And by referring to them as the pro-abortion people, I think you're putting out a subtle message that they're the bad guys. So in any civil discourse where you're trying to reach common ground, I think there's this insidious reaction to you just framing it that way.
I understand the point that he's making, because when we, like I said, I'm pro-choice, and when you call us pro-abortion, we feel like, well, wait a minute, we're not, like, I'm not running around encouraging, I'm not running up to pregnant women saying, hey, make sure you have an abortion, you know what I mean?
Today.
We're not, right, today. Some days I do, but that's, you know.
Right. You know, and you know, I'm kind of torn on this one because I don't feel that I have the right to tell anyone else what to do. So in that sense, I should be pro-choice, but I am a practicing Catholic, and so I'm somewhat conflicted on the issue. And being a man, not a woman, I feel that I can never really get inside their head to make this choice, so I feel it's almost not really my place to say. But as a practicing Catholic, I lean more towards being pro-life.
Right.
Yeah.
But when I hear somebody who's on my side refer to the other side as pro-abortion, I think we're never going to get a compromise with these people because we're subtly, under the radar, we're insulting them. And to take it a step further, you know, he talks about how it's the 15-year-old girls going for these abortions. Well, I'm sure it does happen. I know for a fact it does happen.
Sure.
But that's a small percentage. And everyone can give an anecdote of somebody they know, but it's a very minute, and I'm all for parental notification. I don't know how that doesn't pass.
Right.
But that being said, that's not who's beating the path to Planned Parenthood,
Well,
this 15-year-old girl. It just isn't.
In fairness to Gary, I think he was just using that as an example. I don't think he was saying that that's the demographic that's getting abortions.
That's true. But I
There are
noticed that
statistics
people
on the
arguing
age bracket that has the
use
most.
that as a hypothetical. And it really is such a tiny demographic that, again, it becomes this subtle thing to push an agenda.
Well,
You know,
it's
I know that he means well, but I think the other side takes it as, you know, a line in the sand, not an attempt to. That's my take on it.
Okay, well, I think your point about the pro-abortion comment is probably legit. I frame it that way deliberately to cause trouble.
Gary likes to cause trouble.
But
As do I.
As do we all.
but the thing.
So I think when you are a legislator and you are trying to reach across the aisle, that's probably the wrong place to cause that kind of trouble. Nothing gets done if you're just poking each other back and forth.
Yeah.
On the same token, when you've got people that look at somebody who's had an abortion, approaching them and calling them certain names.
Yeah, baby killer. Crap,
You know,
yeah.
I understand that has the same effect as what this gentleman
Oh,
is saying.
absolutely, yeah.
It's how you approach.
Yeah.
How do you approach the topic, and how do we educate each other?
The problem, the one thing you might not understand is the environment in Concord. The environment in Concord is not what you see here, us talking about it, and Matt sitting next to me and being pro-choice, or I'm being pro-life, because that's not how it works.
I've testified, you know, on educational issues in chambers, in committees up in Concord. So I'm somewhat familiar, and I know exactly, you know, what you're saying. You know, some of these people, they're staunch in their beliefs, whether they're, you know, representing their constituency or whether they're from some backwoods place. And I know you don't mean it as a knock, but I know everybody has their agenda, and I know we have to approach things differently. But the woman's point was great, you know, about being baby killers. What is that? You're right. They're the extremists.
Yeah.
I don't feel to be extreme the other way balances it out. It doesn't work that way. The people who kill abortion doctors so they don't
think we can all
You
agree
know,
on
their
that.
logic is so twisted. You know, do we want to balance the scale by going extreme the other way? I don't think we do. I think the sane people need to meet in the middle and reach the aisle and respect each other and call them pro-life and pro-choice and, you know, not talk about the small percentage of 15-year-old girls because that makes it more of a hot topic.
it's
Well,
not a small
the reason I brought up the 15-year-old girls because we were talking about parental notification. If they were 20, it wouldn't be an issue.
Right.
Right. And that's fair enough, but they are a very small percentage of the people who are.
I remember seeing the percentages, and I know that I think the majority is between 20 and 25.
Really?
But I'm not positive. It's been a while since I saw those
I'd be
numbers.
curious
But
to look that up.
thank you very much for the call.
You're welcome.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks for having me. All right.
Absolutely. Bye-bye.
But the caller made the point that, you know, as a man, I can't make that decision for a woman, and I know a lot of guys are uncomfortable with that. And the way I look at it is this: if you believe that upon conception, that's a human being, okay, as the Catholic teaches, Catholic teaching, and I'm not Catholic, but as a Protestant, I believe that also, that as soon as that sperm meets that egg, and they combine, okay, that's a human being. That's the beginning of a human being. It's still a human being, and a woman's right to choose is in effect, her right to choose to kill her own child. It is in a religious sense.
1%.
Huh?
Women under 15 is 1%.
Under
Women
15.
under 15 is
What about
1%.
15 to
Thank you.
17?
15 and under.
What about 17?
Well, they don't have it like that, but teenagers up to 19,
Yeah.
20%.
Okay.
So
Teena-
20% of the teenagers, but the 18 and above it's hard to split it up.
Yeah.
Yeah,
okay.
15. Okay, so 1%.
Thanks, Joe.
Thanks, Joe.
I want to point something out,
Yeah.
though. It's we talk about the women, and that's extremely important. However, and yes, it's the woman's body, and there is a discussion and a battle of who has the right to say what a woman can do. However you want to believe we were designed, men are protectors of their family, and this decision affects them as well. And we need some male input on healing and from that decision and how they feel, and there needs to be an awareness on that as well. I feel strongly that we should also reach out to the male population and say, this was your child too. How do you feel?
I've always thought, and I've never done this because I'd be way too afraid of the ramifications, that if you are going to have legislation that says somebody's believe in being pro-choice, the man should have a say in whether a woman has an abortion also. And in that, you're telling a man and woman get together, they have unprotected sex, they're going to have a child, and if she decides to have that child, he's on the hook for however much that costs
Right.
forever,
Yeah.
right? Until the kid's 18 or
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah.
Why doesn't he have a choice of saying, no, I'll pay for the abortion, you're getting an abortion, or else I'm not paying for anything? Why isn't that his? If we're going to conclude under the pro-choice mantra that it is not really a human being, it's a zygote or whatever they call it, to make it sound less than human, then why isn't it legitimate for him to say, no, that's not my choice, that's your choice? I've always kind of wanted to introduce legislation like that, just to be the devil's advocate.
Right.
But
Yeah.
I believe the rate of abortions would go up, so I can't possibly, in good conscience, do it.
Yeah.
But you know, what do you?
Yeah. We got about a minute left.
We got a minute left.
We got a
Yeah.
minute
We're
left.
at
Minute
6:54. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Okay. Before you answer that, you just conclude with whatever you would like, hon.
What-
Your closing
Well,
summation, if you will.
Well, I guess my
Thesis.
largest point is wanting people to feel safe and safe enough to talk
Oh yeah,
about
yeah.
it.
Where if somebody wants to talk about it, where should they?
CareNet Crisis Pregnancy Center does have a Bible study called Mended Hearts, and it helps a woman work through her remorse of that decision.
Yeah.
and that's where I went. There are other places. Rachel's Vineyard has a whole weekend. I know if you go to their website, I've not been there, but I know that they administer to men and women, and that's a Catholic organization. And they recognize the emotions or feelings that men have on that decision. And to me, it's about finding peace and healing from that.
Yeah.
That's, if we can get past the pain that this country and this world feels about that decision and this topic, if we can educate ourselves, then there might not be so much anger.
Yeah.
Yep.
No, well said.
Thank you very much, young lady. I know that was tough for you to come on, but it
It wasn't
was
tough for me to come on. I'm a ham.
your hand. But thank you very much.
Welcome.
So anyway, in closing, call your senator, House Bill 1659. That's a good bill. And next week we got Ed Nail from Coalition New Hampshire Taxpayers. We're going to talk about voter fraud.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Okay, this guy's good.
Yeah.
He actually knows what he's talking about.
Okay.
As opposed to me.
Oh, whoa.
Yeah, it'll be
Wow.
a breath
What a
of fresh air.
concept.
All right.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, everybody.